Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Value of Everything. So, I'd like to explore a fairly interesting phenomenon, which is very important when it comes to understanding human psychology, understanding what happens when the shit hits the fan, and when people are in trouble, and when people require help. So, one of our biggest fears is that when economic hardship happens, and when there is a massive catastrophe that occurs, people decide to either start using force against each other and loot and steal and rob and all of those horrible things, and also basically like a heightened level of criminality which will occur and basically bring down society structures exactly how we see them as today. Now, albeit I do recognise it would be totally fallacious for me to say that where there was things like Hurricane Katrina and other catastrophes and the London riots, which I will focus upon a little bit. There was looting and there was martial law called, or just a heightened degree of police force, which was called, which is very telling and very interesting in terms of those situations. But it really is interesting how in some other ways, it isn't actually much of a big deal, and when you put your head to it, it really isn't in a lot of ways anyway. So, okay, so I don't know how many. I don't think there is going to be many of us who are like this way inclined anyway. But let's just think of violence and criminality in the first form. In your day-to-day dealings and life, how often do you actually deal with a violent person? Somebody who is aggressing, using force, using their brute power to get one up over you. Doesn't really happen that often. Now, okay, maybe if we thought that there was no police force in place, maybe our mindsets, certain people's mindsets could change. But in theory, it's really not an awful lot which occurs there. People will just say, if we said, okay, the police force are going to be on a reduced level, and basically all they may have is just a couple of police force in the police station or something like that. Really, an awful lot really wouldn't happen too much. It's just really in sense of a case of an emergency, when an emergency is called, and there's like a violence occurring, and then like maybe a domestic violence, or there's a drunkards fighting on the streets or something like that. That's where you would have a certain element of violence, and there wouldn't be anybody there to break up and keep the peace. So that's pretty much the area of thing. Maybe we would get some louts who start to think, yeah, there's nobody that's going to arrest me tonight. I can start smashing up McDonald's and smashing up the property of somebody's, and there'll be no retribution for that. It will be fairly, like, it'll be kind of trying, but let's just say, for example, that this is a few more years in the future. A lot of people have drones, for example. I'm not saying. We could say now today, okay, everyone's got camera phones. If a kid or somebody decided to do something like that act, I guess for one thing, people may decide to smash up somebody's McDonald's, but if they try and smash up somebody's private property, like their house, people still have a certain tendency of fear of retribution, and fear of retribution is incredibly powerful to a lot of people, particularly when you do not know, when it's an unknown of what is going to occur. So if you got a fair I think most people have got a fair understanding that if I was to burgle somebody's house, I would probably, depending on the situation of my background and everything else, I might just about get away with it with community service or a light sentence. And if I was a serial burglar, maybe I would be getting a tougher sentence. Alone to be just somebody who breaks and enters into a house, I firstly foremost actually put myself into a certain level of risk anyway. If I am seen to be breaking and entering by the property owner, I believe that there is a just cause for somebody to protect themselves and their family, and particularly if it's all happening at night and they can't quite work out whether I'm armed or not. They can obviously grab weapons to keep me away. Now, obviously, I think there is a lot of legal wranglings which occur there, but if it's all happening at the night and I'm breaking in through the property owner's son or daughter's window, then obviously there's a lot more justifications which are occurring here to defend his property and ownership and everything else. So it is there is a higher set of retributions which can occur in certain things like breaking and entering, and even just if you're going to assault somebody on the street, there is, dependent on who that person may be friends with or anything like that, you may have punched somebody who is friends with a professional boxer, and then that person's going to come around to your house, and then you're going to get retribution for that act itself. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to be just, or this is morality at work here, because a lot of people don't necessarily quite understand the terms of morality and things like that, but and will usually go a little bit over top in terms of retribution. And the reason of going over the top is to ensure that the retribution doesn't reoccur. So it's all based upon a fear of fear. But even so, if we do have the police force, which is retrenched quite rapidly, there is certain levels of society which kick in and start to freeform. Now, obviously, this is a fear as well, because we instead have removed the power from people that are educated in the way of using force, using the right degree of force on citizens and populations. Obviously, that's sometimes in question in terms of how harsh police can be. But in theory, if people said you've got the two choices, you've got either the police who are going to arrest you, or there is a lynch mob that are going to grab you, and you can take your chances with those. Who would you rather prefer? And obviously, people would always prefer the police force. So, because obviously, I think the main guiding lines here is that they, the theory would be is that the police would not be really in a situation where they will be handing out batons and battening you down and things like that, unless you were trying to violently resist arrest and things like that. So. I guess it depends on a little bit on the country as well, but even so, and the policeman, but that would be the way the theory goes. So let's just think of in terms of what the police force does in nowadays society. Now, I am a fairly, I would say I'm a very good citizen. I do not have any real violent bone in my body, maybe in terms of self-defense, but beyond that, I've got no real violent bone in my body whatsoever, really. And when it comes to my day-to-day dealings, and say if I've been in a pub or a club and I've seen people being a little bit shitty, and definitely there was a certain way that I could escalate the situation, and I've decided not to escalate the situation and walk away from a situation. I found that that was probably a better way of dealing with the situation, rather than me going away and then there'll be a fist fight and who knows what could happen, and I could lose an eye and things like that. So it's really not worth it in the whole grand scheme of things to find myself chasing after violence. And there obviously is a little bit of combinations in the way that people have been brought up to start looking for violence in comparisons to peaceful people. So, and people that will choose to use words and arguments to just their cause in comparison to using their muscles. Even though I'm a fairly big-ish guy, and it does advantage me to an extent to use power and force, I can obviously understand that if I start using the power and force, I wouldn't like any of the relationships that I would be in, like my relationship with my wife, relationship with my kids, all those kind of things. My relationships would all deteriorate quite rapidly if I started to use my power and force to get what I wanted. I do like to apply logic, arguments, trade, exchanges of ideas to get on by. So why is this so busy? Okay, so yeah, I guess just to recap, I guess this podcast is mainly here just for a little bit of a calming aspect in terms of if major panic sets in and we have budgetary and problems in the way that government can manage things, if they are really on a shoestring budget and things like that. There is a certain level, if people like you and I do have a little bit of an inkling of morality and things like that, we can apply ourselves a certain level of free-forming morality and justice ourselves. And obviously, society and common law is based upon everybody working together to have a free world where we can trade with each other, we can live in peace and not fear anybody stealing our possessions, and obviously us all descending into a world of Mad Max chaos where dog eats dog continuously and nobody can ever achieve any type of success. So this is all obviously very key and very important stuff, and we should really be studying this as a lot more. And it the ideas of morality and law and the police and obviously the use of the police force shouldn't really be kept with philosophers and lawyers and the police force. It should all be shared, and I think really people should have an active role in terms of the way that we all manage our society. And obviously, when I use society, it's a little bit of a broken word, because you can't necessarily class. Obviously, a society is based upon individuals, not necessarily a whole grouping of people, which have all got all different motives and agendas and everything else. But let's just say society just as a principle for the meantime. Now, one thing that I always like to hear, and I think it's a very good thing to hear, is that a community raises a child. And I believe, and the believe is not the correct words, I am very with and very for this argument that this is very important. And I believe that I am for this argument. I believe, I can't understand that word. I'm for this argument in terms of having people in society and people and good people shaping other people in the future as well. So there is a certain level of mentoring which occurs throughout our times, particularly if you have surrounded yourself with good people, that you will progress further. You will have a better understanding of the nature of your reality. You will understand how to achieve and be successful and be well disciplined in the world that you live in. If we surround ourselves in good people, good communities, we could say, to a certain extent. The raising of children is fundamental into the way that we have and build our societies. And this is really important with our moral agency that we apply to our children from the onset. Now, obviously, the first time that we really have to start applying ourselves in morality is when we have children. Again, for the next time, maybe we may have some wranglings in the law courts, and there may be business deals that never went correctly, and insurance claims. But really, our dealings with law really comes down to pretty much signing on contract agreements and not much else beyond that. And maybe seeing things like border security or cops on TV, but really understanding of law and order isn't really fundamental to anybody's upbringing. It's not really a taught subject of how to be lawful or how to be moral. I guess it is in the higher levels of schooling, but it doesn't necessarily happen too much. I guess there is, obviously, when there is fighting and stuff like that, we are told not to fight. We are told not to don't do what you would do to each other. So there is light levels of morality which is happening. But when it comes down to the parent and the child, I would say the majority of the time, people would have not much of really a good grasp of morality teachings. Maybe if you potentially from religious backgrounds, there may be certain levels of religious teachings in those kind of forms, but it's really going to be a little bit more structured around storytelling, more so than getting to the reasoning and the factual points. I guess that you can get very factually pointing and reasoning parts to religious stories, but it's not quite there. But yeah, you could say people of more religious backgrounds has got a better idea of living in a peaceful society, unless their religious background is some kind of like devil worshipping. But okay, so next up, so let's bring us back to this terms of morality, and this is why I think it's always key to society just to understand a little bit about morality, a bit about law, a bit about just like the first onsets and the first understandings of where society and everything else breaks down. Now, one of the most important things, and this really is fundamental, I think, in a lot of terms of working out our morality, is property rights. Now, once we now, obviously, the first degree of property rights is our bodies. Our bodies is the one thing that we cannot really say is shared with anybody else's, unless you're Siamese twinned or something like that. But even so, our bodies are our own, and really, we shouldn't be using our bodies to cause harm or violence on other people's bodies. And we should be respectful of other human beings. So that is one fundamental driver. Now, once we have our bodies, we can use our bodies to produce goods. We can be productive on land. We can reap products from the land and anything that we've built and created from the land. So if I was walking down the woods and I picked up a piece of bark, obviously nobody really would give two shits about a piece of bark, and I wouldn't care if somebody took it off my hand or anything like that. I mean, I'll probably say, what are you doing there? But beyond that, it's not really anything of any value. However, if I did create anything of any value, then that would be classed as a product of my body, of something that I have created with my mind. And I have worked and strived for that. So, and obviously we can we can theorize that and put it into objects like notes and money and transfer value in different means from our bodies to different products to employers to back to the employee and vice versa. So there we have structurally the idea of property rights. And where we do not have property rights, maybe we might have a full sense of communism. We have power, and we have the rule of power over people, and then there we have unjustness and immorality, which is being caused. So that's where communism doesn't really kind of help us out too much. But where we have pure property rights, we understand that everybody is individual and we shouldn't really be going around inflicting harm on other people. That's where we have a good understanding of everything. So there you go, in that sense of morality. Now, obviously another one is the golden rule. Do not do unto those as you would do unto yourself. So that's another important factor to take into account when you approach every situation. But I guess one of the things that I always found that it was a little bit, I was very unsure about, is that if you have a violent situation, the police force would always say, walk away from it, do not get involved. This is not your thing to get involved in. This is the police's matter, and you should not really involve yourself in such a violent act. Now, I guess if you saw a punch-up, you shouldn't be running in there with flying fists and everything else. But if there was anything in your capacity to dissuade the fight or potentially protect those two bodies from harming each other, then that would be a fairly good thing to do. I guess you really don't want to put yourself in harm's way. But say, for example, you saw two kids fighting and you're a full-grown adult, then obviously you do have certain physical capacities to break up fights and ensure that violent acts do not occur, because things can escalate, things can, a high degree of damage can be caused. So I would be always, with a certain level of understanding of morality and justness, I definitely would try to promote some kind of degree of trying to manage situations without escalating a situation. But it's a very difficult matter. It's not for the complete novices. It's probably something you might want to start with, just trying to make peaceful arguments, and then try and go beyond that point through higher tiers and higher tiers. But where you do have very violently inclined people, they are highly dangerous. Obviously, I wouldn't really, and you're not quite experienced in that matter of negotiating, I probably wouldn't recommend putting yourself in that kind of harm's way. But obviously, as I mentioned, there are certain degrees to which your involvement is important in the societies that we grow up in. So let's say that there is a government which is on its knees and it cannot afford all of its major life support structures because of the burden of its debt, and the financial markets can no longer afford to pay for the bonds. So its bonds. So it's it potentially may have a situation where the police force are being paid in kind and in the future and things like that. So we do have this little bit of an issue in the structure of the way society could be placed. This is potentially what may happen. This is what happened in the Roman days, is that currency got diluted, but I don't think you can really dilute that with notes, because obviously, well, you can, but obviously with quantitative easing and increasing of the money supply, so people get paid in whatever dollars they are, and really there isn't really anything much to back them up, so they get paid higher and higher amounts, so that it doesn't really have and attain much value. So then you have a certain level of mercantilism. People that have land, people that who own goods, can provide food and sustenance and shelter for people's families. That security force potentially, the police force turns slightly into a security force. for property ownership and protection of lands. So potentially this may be the little bit of the indicators and markers of where certain levels of society may turn to. However, and I've made this point before, is that we do have a point where there could be certain applications which assist each other in saying, okay, I am being chased here, please can somebody assist me, somebody's going to rob me here, and things like that. And if I'm in a city or something, in a situation where people are around, this can alert other people to this application, and then people can come to the aid and rush to the assistance of helping that person. If there is these privateers, police forces, which are not getting paid by the government, which may be on its knees, then the police force may just sign up to this business application and say, okay, well, you may as well pay me instead, and then I can just rush to people's aids when when there's a signal on this mobile phone app, which potentially could quite easily convert over to like the 911 sort of system. So we could have that element, and obviously if a police force did rush to somebody's aid, then potentially there may be a certain degree of compensation for that police person for doing that act, and maybe if that person does have a certain amount of possessions, then maybe they'll be able to make payment. If they don't, then maybe they won't. But I guess if you have been rescued from your life being saved, I think majority of people will be very charitable to that person. Maybe you might have this total influx of about thousands of people trying to rush to your aid when you probably wasn't really in that much danger in the first place. but yeah, even so, obviously I'm talking about a very sort of future point in time which may happen, but let's go back to today's society. So let's just say, for example, the police go on strike. This happened obviously in terms of the London riots. Now, London riots was a very interesting point in time where it wasn't actually the police going on strike, but the police was outmanned or just had no capacity to keep up with the protesters. Now, obviously, there was a certain level of a class and racial element to the riots, which obviously has a lot of what shall we say? Has a lot more dynamics to it than just this chaos and law and order which has occurred. Obviously, people are trying to justify their actions by trying to get retribution for themselves. So if you are a young black male in London and you feel like you've had a fairly tough and torrid time, there has been very little in the way of opportunities. The schooling system has literally just pushed you down to the lowest levels of feeling in society, and really you're just torn, and there's a lot of violence that you have been surrounded by throughout your upbringing. Then you will feel very annoyed and like really basically you'd have given up on the world that you living in. And then if you do see some kind of vivid signal of somebody being unjustly or violently hit by the government or the state, then you will have a certain element of like, this is intolerable, and you will have people that would riot. And then obviously you may have some people in those factions of you who may say, this is a good opportunity just to get my just cause. I would love to get some great sneakers for myself, and this is all like this is probably working quite well into my opportunity and I feel like taking some sneakers for myself. Now obviously that person probably hadn't been quite raised in a moral family as much as others, so therefore taking for what they can at a time. Maybe, obviously, I think this is probably more so the case, is that they have been raised around peers, maybe gang societies that are into the criminal aspects of society, like violence and things like that, and taking what you can get, which is, into a certain level, to the very lower parts of society, is a survival strategy in itself. So there's definitely a lot of understanding in those respects. But obviously, for a large place like London, it really does. It is very alarming, because a lot of people don't really know everybody that's walking down the same road as you. So it is incredibly alarming that there could be a quite a rapid breakdown in society, and you could have mass lootings in shops and things like that. So say if you was living in a country, it's kind of if somebody decided to start stealing and looting and all those kind of things, even if there wasn't a police force there, people could quickly grab him and then arrest him under citizen's arrest, and then that problem was over. But however, if you are looking at a major international city like London, and you are having a certain riot or a certain situation on your hands where there is mass lootings by certain segments of of society, which are wanting to get justice upon themselves, maybe stealing that sneaker is justification for all the pain and anguish that you have been put through. And I would probably say that there's probably a lot of it to do with family as well as government. So, yeah, it is very alarming for people to see that kind of thing happening, particularly because it was easily understood in terms of the police were very much outmanned, and that's where people that believe in the government say, okay, well, I thought government is meant to handle all of this kind of stuff. And then when they start to become outmanned, then there is a high level of alarmedness that happens, and people are like, what the hell? This is very scary stuff. And curfews were called, and certain levels of management were happening, but we did have the formation of certain groups and gangs and stuff like that. I know, obviously, that this is the formations of like the mafia, pretty much, but there was like supporters clubs and things like that who were trying to start to reinstall a certain level of civil order in society, starting to form again. And there was obviously word of that and stuff like that, but obviously if this kind of reformation of order wasn't managed to the correct degree with the incorrect people, then we do have a lot of dangers in society in itself, because the retribution could have been quite harsh by this free-forming group, and I probably would have imagined it would have been probably a little bit more on a racial motive as well, and then there would have been a retribution against retribution, and then there could have been more civil order. But even so, one of the points that I would like to make is that there is a certain level of a counterbalance which occurs throughout society, regardless of what the situation may happen. Now, so it's a very tricky point, and obviously people get very fearful when people say, okay, well, you're just trying to promote the reformation of some kind of mafia again, and people will obviously enjoy this power, and people will say, okay, can I get some money from everybody just to sustain this organization, and if you don't want your window smashed in tomorrow, you better give me payment, and things like that. So we have created another power structure which can tax its citizens, and people can be in fear of this new power structure. So it is a little bit alarming, and it's also a little bit of an understanding as well that this government entity, this law and order entity, does regrow and rebirth itself when things do get kind of harsh. But with people with certain senses of morality and things like that, then retribution doesn't occur too harshly. Power doesn't really go to straight to individuals, and potentially we could have a decentralized sense of order which occurs, which could be very interesting and very valid to what people happens. Now, I wanted to cover a lot more parts than just policing and violence and force, but obviously just to go over certain other aspects. Society does have some really good counterbalances which occur when through times of hardship. There is a definite statistical link between when people become a little bit poorer, people do become a little bit more charitable. So there is certain levels of connections which occur there, and if you think of the counterbalance which may occur, there is definitely a link where people are more charitable. There is a definite thought of people feeling more happy when people are more charitable. So maybe even where you become poorer, you become more charitable, and you therefore become happier. So it's I'm not promoting being very poor and charitable, but even so, it's definitely interesting concepts where we look at the happiest people that live on the planet. They are actually some of the poorest people on the planet. So it's very interesting in those terms, and maybe it is because they have to be a lot more value-based, a lot more altruistic, and looking after each other's, everyone's citizens, rather than being in a situation where it's dog eat dog. We all work in the city, and we're all stressed. We work all these high hours, and then we go back into our own little apartments, and we never chat to our neighbours, and it's always a continuous struggle of getting into gridlock roads and everything else. So yeah, it's just definitely thoughts there for you. Where we look at this situation, there's good people start to stick their head up when bad situations occur. I do definitely believe that it's part of human psyche. There is a counterbalancing part of society where things get too out of hand, things get too extreme. There is the counterbalance which occurs as long as enough people are raised in a peaceful manner and a way to and spoken to with law and order and understand certain levels of property rights and things like that. Then there is a definite counterbalancing which occurs. Now, I've obviously mentioned in past that there's definite certain areas where the government has really pushed for society to almost get to a state of breaking down, where you've created a welfare state, not about getting people back to work, but people to be continuously on a welfare system and never really having any ability or skills to create value for other people. That is disastrous for a lot of people. So they obviously will require the highest amount of charity when these things and these problems do occur. So it's very important in those kind of senses to think of communities and everything else, and to create value for other people. So that's just one little area of charity and when things become harsh. The mindset where people, I have this theory as well, is that where people get so oppressed, there's certain levels of oppression that people can take, and then they can take that no more, and then there will be a sort of a slight overthrow. Now, obviously, okay, we could say maybe the Jews and Nazism, which probably almost got decimated. That is probably a little bit of an impossible situation that they were put under. But there is obviously oppression which was being occurred, and then other countries and other states were saying this is intolerable. We need to get ourselves involved. Obviously, they were probably megalomaniacs in themselves, but there are counterbalances. There is evil to fight off evil. There is all these different factors which can occur in situations of chaos, which do actually bring a level of society back to normality. And if, say, for whatever reason, the government didn't actually mention this, but there was no police force that existed for a week. Now, people obviously would see that people were a few people would be dying here and there would be no police being called to situations. But quickly, people would probably maybe grasp that the police force wasn't around. But really, in day-to-day society, people have got to go to work, people have got to get paid, people have to respect other people's property rights, or everyone's going to go pretty shitty. And if you look at, I think one of the important things in society is obviously if you look in terms of family structures, families do seem to be that pinnacle of structure where you do have a family, people do start creating a certain sense of community around that because of people trying to look after your kids and vice versa. And there's a certain level of understanding about the amount of effort that is required amongst this issue. So there is definite connections in society of what happens when a family is created and people have to start looking after each other. And responsibilities are taken, and all those kind of beautiful things of society, which starts to structure upon things, and property rights obviously become very relevant and very important. So also another thing that obviously is, it never really gets too mentioned as well, is through hardships and chaos, is say if I'm going back to London a lot of times, obviously we are looking at British society, British community, but I guess this does determine, obviously, I think the Britons are a good little indication of Western society in general. They are a mix of Europe. They are a mix of a lot of empires and things like that, and they were obviously a big force on the world at one point, so that there is a lot of that sort of thing that goes on in communities a lot of times. And if you think of law and order and property rights and what's the original document of law? I can't remember what the document's called. Something like the Magna Carta. That's it. Yeah, there's all those things which are part of civil society in Britain. So it's kind of interesting in these things. But obviously, where we had the bombings which occurred in London, it was actually happening in the poorest parts of the community. So the east side of London is basically where all the immigrants, and still to this day to a certain extent to poorer parts of London, all the immigrants would descend onto that part of London. So you would have all the Irish escaping from the potato famine. They would go to the East End of London. You would have potentially Jewish migration from persecution, other migrations from Europe, all descend into the East End of London. And that would be a community in itself that would be a little bit set apart to the rest of London. But they were massively bombed through the Blitz in Second World War. And it was revered how that sense of community sort of banded together. Even though there was bombings that were occurring every night, it actually banded the communities closer and closer together because of the violence that was being persecuted against them. So they were actually becoming more bonded in communities and societies. When hardships actually occurred to them, they were obviously being rationed. There was having a lot more limited resources in society, all these kind of things which started to occur. And then there was counterbalances of communities and societies becoming more entrenched, more in some ways happier. That you do speak about people that lived in these times. Obviously, there was hardships and deaths and things like that occurring, but a lot of people say that sometimes it was their best moments in their life. It really sort of brought out the best in them. So definitely look upon these moments, and if you think about the people that are charitable in these moments, these people that have been prudent in these hard times, and then they look at the problems that have occurred, and they go, I can help some people. I know some skills. I can train some other people. I might be able to get some food to some other people's bellies. It's really interesting stuff which occurs in these situations where people really rapidly fear and think, oh my God, the government can't do this one. They've been outgunned, they've been out-resourced, there's no way that they can continue on any further. you'll be surprised how society can free form in a free market, decentralized manner. Potentially. Obviously, you do have a centralized manner as well, which free forming justice can occur as well. But then, obviously, we do have susceptibility to briberies and things like that, and people getting a little bit over the top with their power and requesting more and more taxation for their power. But there is a definite degree to which people will jump back from the brink and say, okay, well, we will not put up with this anymore. I don't think this is tolerable. I think we need to do something about this. And hey presto, you do have a great deal of ability for people to turn things around. So I am stuck behind a beautiful car which has restricted me, which is really nice. Never mind. Sorry about that. So yeah, I guess one thing we need to sort of understand is that we need to look at certain points, and one of the important factors is the slow drip of poverty which could occur. Now, a slow drip of poverty, which is pretty much happening in society today, where the economy stays that everything's getting better and better, and there's quantitative easing, which is occurring. So this is an American society. Quantitative easing, which is happening, which is increasing money supply. It's actually enabling the government to sell off bonds and then buy it with its own. I start again. So the American government issues bonds. It sells it to the international market, but there's not enough people in the international market to buy its bonds, so it prints money, sends it to the Treasury, and then Treasury buys it. So it actually gives them free money in that sense, in a weird kind of sense. But also that obviously increases the money supply in the system, and at the same time it gives very low interest rates because people can get these debts, obligations, and they get resold into the market, and that gives us gives the institutional banking system a very low interest rate to work with, which is fantastic for getting more credit and more liquidity into the system. But unfortunately, what is happening with all this credit and liquidity is that companies are using it, and then they're buying back their own stock price. It's called buybacking, and it's really just distorting the market in sense of the market. The productivity of businesses is not getting any better. It's actually probably getting slightly worse, and there's probably just a little bit of cost saving which is occurring. And there is a lot more unemployment and outsourcing and automation, which gets occurred. If there's automation, then there is the potential of new business to be created. But new business isn't really being created. It's just more about a more efficient, more automated model, because people don't really want to take risks in these environments. So we're finding that there's a slow drip of unemployment which is occurring. People are finding it longer and longer to get into more employment. And as we're seeing this happening, the statistics are telling us otherwise. Statistics are saying that the employment rates are stabilizing. They're at low 6%, but we are not really marking the ones which are no longer seeking work anymore, and things like that. So this continuing form of liquidity, and there'll be more of this occurring, I believe, in the future, where there'll be more pumping of liquidity into the market, and the same sort of things which will be happening and again, and really where businesses are not getting more people that are going to be able to buy these products, then they're going to find that their margins are cut down even further, and it's just going to gradually continue on. This is a slightly dangerous scenario for us. In some ways, it would be good if we just got called on, we ain't got the money, let's go bust sort of situation. But I guess governments don't really want to do that. They like power. So in this sense, and obviously there will be some massive problems to deal with for a government instantly, which would be like the welfare state, a number of things, healthcare, lots of things which would start to really question the government's ability, and they don't really want to do that. So, so we have these issues. And the problem that I see is that if you have this slow drip of problems in society, I think that can be far more dangerous than if you have a sudden power struggle or something like that, or somebody like what we have with civil riots and things like that. Because when there's a civil riot and things like that, you've definitely got some target. You've got certain things where you go, okay, what they've done is immoral here, and we need to find justice and things like that, and you can quite quickly resolve a situation. But where we have a certain scenario like Nazi Germany and political powers coming into fruition, and there's a gradual passing of laws and a gradual passing of people getting put into the ghettos, and there's propaganda which is being displayed where people are being put in ghettos, and it's this beautiful place, and where communities can reform. Like if there is this slow level of communities which do occur, there's this slow drip of problems which can occur in terms of poverty. That's where I think there's a lot of danger, because people are just going to feel like, well, tomorrow's going to be worse, and what is the point in helping somebody else out? So it's that scenario which can be very harmful to the world that we live in. And I guess some people there have been some very prudent people out there, people that have not been gambling much of their money. They have been saving their money, and they have been really doing quite poorly from the scenarios that have been occurring in this credit liquidity expansion situation. So really, these people should be, the patient people should be reaping the rewards of their prudency, but really they're not getting the rewards, and they have been really the virtuous ones. And the major risk takers, the ones who have been continuously credit expanding and being property investors and stock market expansionists, they have been kind of, if they did a little bit of research in terms of how the money and the profitability of these business models that they're trying to invest in really are not quite sustainable as what they first seem, then there should have been certain types of reallocation of resources in society to the patient ones, to the ones who have been prudent with their money, but that hasn't been occurring. But if there was a certain, a black swan event where the markets would crash, and there wasn't this drip drying of the breakdown of the economy with quantitative easing, then we would have a little bit more of a vivid situation of, whoa, this needs help. We need to come to some kind of reorganization here because we have these problems. The government can no longer do this and this and this, so we need to resolve these problems. And that's where obviously the government can be questioned as to its validity for resolving certain situations. So yeah, we do have people who are good and people that will, and there's people like you and I who will come to people's aids when times become hard. But if there is the slow, monotonous pain of the economy just gradually getting worse, while the media and the government says that they're trying to resolve the issue, even though they're just paying down a little bit more on the interest of their debt, not the actual debt, it is a worrying signal. And in some ways, it would be better if there was slightly more dramatic things that occurred. Now, obviously, people would hate the sound of that in a lot of ways because they think, oh my God, a dramatic situation which can occur, which rips apart society and things like that. But it does give people a little bit more of an indication, a bit of a navigation point to actually understand, okay, right, this is one of the problems that we're having in society. We need to find a solution to it. Now, obviously, I would say maybe a good solution by people and our own self-empowerment would be a decentralized solution where we do not have power coming into the situation and obviously having a lot of problems of backhanders and all of those corrupt problems. So we should take calm. We should be peaceful in tough times. We should try and be charitable in these times, and we should be looking always to finding some kind of solution. Now, I've made some purposes and points in the past that where we do have a government which is on its knees, it doesn't have the money to continue certain areas, that is a perfect opportunity to create value for other people. And we can do it in a very peaceful manner where we can find certain businesses that can provide a great deal of wealth for other people in those problems. Sorry, I'm being very repetitive in this conversation here today. I don't know what's happened to my thinking, but yeah, I think I just want to give you those thoughts. If you do have any more theories about how people can be good in tough times and how people may not be good in tough times just because of the slowness of how our economy degrades, is an interesting perspective. And really, the fear element is very important, and the fear element is just one of those things which really does spark our brain. When we do have this continuous fear, then there's certain like chemical reactions which happen in our belly. It makes our brain tick over this item that we'll just sleep on it, and our brains will be ticking over on it until we can fire out as many solutions to the problem as possible. But if we are dulled down and we're saying the economy's all right and we're just trying to find a job, and it just brings us back down to the levels of just thinking that we're a waste of time and we can't do anything in the society and it's our problems, and not really just thinking, okay, well, we can do this. I can take my own sort of life in my own hands, and I can turn this thing around. I can find solutions to these problems. If we can create that mindset and really understand that, and understand that the slow drip dry is just one of those problems which is occurring, and it's a bit of a mask of the situation which is happening. Really, there is we should be taking urgency in our own hands and really just strive to sort of resolve issues, write down plans. Okay, if there was the economy if the government was really running out of money, what would be the first organisations that it might decide to shut down? What kind of businesses could free market, decentralised businesses, which could come to the aid of society to resolve these problems? You've got some great plans there which could be put in place, and really, even from a government's perspective, that would be fantastic, because obviously they're privatising parts of the economy, which may have been a major cost to them, and now they've become even more efficient. So it's not like this is a totally anarchist sort of perspective. This really does help out in a lot of conservative perspectives as well. So you're not really fighting up against the state, and I never really have been a proponent of I don't think there is any real justifiable cause to go fight against the state. I just think there's a good cause to find solutions with the state, and really just find a decentralized way to manage things to create the maximizing potential of a free market economy, which is really firing on all cylinders, not going to rust. So on that note, I thank you very much for your time. Thanks for your patience. I have been a little bit on the slow side today, but thanks as always. I will be back with more very soon.